All right. And if you don't want your face recorded, just take yourself off of that. All right. And so let me know if you can't hear it or see it. It didn't give me the prompt this time like it normally does, so I hope it works.
The state we're in. Why does Pennsylvania have so many governments? Pennsylvania has 67 counties, 959 boroughs, 1,546 townships, and 56 cities. Historically, many of Pennsylvania's local governments were formed with geography in mind. Bodies of water, mountains, and roads often determined where a borough, township, or city would be located. Pennsylvania has maintained so many municipalities and governments because often citizens said smaller local governments were more responsive to their needs. In Pennsylvania, counties are responsible for courts, prisons, planning, and developing for the future, public health and safety, and the elections. Cities usually have the most people living in them, but not always. Cities can adopt their own laws with some restrictions. Boroughs normally have smaller populations, but again, not always. Borough councils usually have the most power to make rules and laws. Townships are governed by supervisors or commissioners and often are larger physically than cities or boroughs.
All right. So everyone you heard, you were able to hear that? Okay. Okay, so I have one more. So that what was interesting to me is for some reason in my head, I always thought that townships were bigger than boroughs. So that was kind of news to me. All right.
They're often bigger in land area.
I wonder if I just think that because my particular borough is larger. Carlisle Borough.
Townships often have a lot of land.
Okay.
Geographically.
All right. So everyone was able to hear that last one, correct? Okay. Here's one more.
We pay a lot of attention to state and national government, but how much do you know about your local government? Let's start with a quick definition. States are divided into counties. In Pennsylvania, counties are divided into local governments, also called municipalities. For instance, if you live in Franklin County in Pennsylvania, you also live in a municipality. It might be a borough or a township. What does your borough or township do for you? Almost all local governments own roads and keep them in good repair year-round. Your municipality also regulates land use based on the community's goals. These might include commercial and industrial growth, farmland preservation, or providing a variety of housing options. Many local governments own and operate public water and sewer systems. A handful of municipalities own electric utilities, and one, the borough of Chambersburg, has a natural gas system. The Pennsylvania Constitution requires every local government to provide fire and rescue services. While some operate their own departments, most support volunteer fire and rescue companies instead. Your community may have its own police department or participate in a regional police organization. If not, then your police protection is provided by the Pennsylvania State Police. Your township or borough may provide recreation services through parks and other facilities that it owns and maintains. Some municipalities support historic preservation or have historic districts and provide other cultural and community activities. Some even own cemeteries. The type of services your municipality provides is directly related to the revenue it collects. Real estate and property taxes and income taxes are the main sources of revenue. Other public funding and grants are usually a small part of the budget. As a resident, you may also pay user fees for services such as water and sewer. Your fee is based on how much you use. You pay a user fee every time you use a parking meter. So what's your role in local government? As a citizen, you elect local officials to govern your borough or township, but you can also get involved by serving on a board or commission or as a volunteer. Sound interesting? Learn more. Start by attending local government meetings. You'll be surprised how few people do. Learn about your municipality through its website or Facebook page or in local news media. Start a dialogue, talk to a local official, and find the right fit for you in your municipality.
Okay, so the big thing I wanted you to get out of that last bit there is, you know, what you guys
People have no.
who are already here are already. Oop, hold on.
It's not. It's physical process.
My computer's talking. What was I saying? Oh, to basically to get involved with your community and to attend local zoning ordinances, school board meetings, and just borough or township meetings and that kind of thing. And then in addition to that, you can find groups such as Climate Reality and Beyond Plastic, Move Past Plastic, watershed groups, etc., to get involved in to help protect your community and make sure that it stays a nice, healthy environment for us all to live. So I want to introduce you guys now to an activity where we are going to just brainstorm issues that you have in your community and what government level or person you think you would need to get in touch with to try and make a change for that issue. So I'm going to load up because there is a small group of us. Jamboard, I put it in the chat, but if you came late, you might not get it. So I'm going to re-put it in there. Okay, so if you go on here, there's these little post-it notes that you can click on and add your issue that either you're working on or you think is an issue and you'd like to learn more about how to take care of that issue. And this will help.
I don't see it in the chat. Do other people see it? I don't see it in the chat.
You do not see it in the chat. Oh, okay, hold on. It is somehow got just direct messaged. So let's try this. There you go. Okay. And then I'm going to also load it up and do a screen share as well. Okay. So what you do is there's this little post-it note to your left. And you can click on that and then just type away. So one of the things that Move Past Plastic is working on with Beyond Plastic is synthetic playing fields. And artificial turf, poured in place, that kind of thing. And so who do you guys think I should be reaching out to on a government level to address these playing surfaces? Would it be the state, the county, or the municipality?
Is it the municipality that's responsible for the local parks?
Yes, exactly. So it depends on your campaign, as we'll talk about. If we are trying to say, for example, like in my community, I found out that they had ripped up the school grass and they were putting in local artificial turf. So at that moment, I was trying to deal with that one singular local turf field. And then they also put in a poured in place called PIP playground, which is the rubberized playground. And that I also, was a local thing. But we could also address it at a county level and at a state level to stop the, them being put in on a greater scale as well. So, let's see, ban grocery bags, transportation, takeout containers, good. Somehow mine disappeared, so I'm going to delete it and try it again. What other ones do we have? Hazardous waste products. Banning polystyrene. And air quality. From industrial pollution, exterior paint, lead in roadway. All right, these are some good things. So in there, taking some of these, where would we go to ban polystyrene? Would that be local, county, or state?
Well, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh as municipal entities were responsible for banning plastic bags in those jurisdictions, right? That was a city, so a municipality could do that too, I would think.
Yeah.
I would also though think that some of the municipalities, like where I am, I'm like in the borough of Mechanicsburg, might be so small that you might be better going on a higher level. I don't know.
Okay, that's some good
Yeah.
thoughts. Yeah.
I mean, I
So
think that the takeout containers you might be able to do locally with your local restaurants, but when you get to plastic grocery bag, I don't know why, but I just think that that might be a more of a county or a higher, I'm not sure.
Well, a municipality
Yeah.
would have to deal with all of the retail
All the
establishments
retail, yeah.
within that municipality, which would be probably somewhat daunting for the municipality leaders. Not that it couldn't
Yeah.
be done, but it seems to be more easily done in a large urban center.
Jason?
Yeah, I agree with all that, but I think this can be done on different levels. I think we're all kind of getting to that. I think because I believe there are some state bans on plastic bags as well. So I think it can be on different levels. And to your points, I agree that I think it's easier for like larger municipalities to really be able to take care of it and handle it. So I think it depends on where you live. And if I was trying to fight back, I'm in the Pittsburgh area, so we have it already, but I would want to push it further out to county, like for where I'm at.
Yeah.
One
think
thing, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like I was telling you, I didn't know that like in Mechanicsburg, there was pushback about businesses having to recycle, and then the county let the businesses get away with not doing it. So I'm thinking that, I mean, the local municipality. So I'm thinking that it might have more teeth in it. Also, it might be easier on a larger scale. Maybe I'm wrong, than like if you tried to do it locally and everybody was fighting you.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think a retail store like Giant or Walmart prefers individual municipalities having their own bag ban ordinance, or do you think they would prefer a state or a larger size?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, if someone else knows the answer, I'll back away.
Go ahead, Becca.
No, I was just gonna think out loud. Probably whatever is cheaper. I think they'd obviously prefer none at all. The problem with having state bans is they would just go Well, I guess it's tough if we're talking about Giant or a supermarket, because you'd have to be really specific about like what exactly you're banning, because a lot of the products are not produced in state. So then if a state is banning a product that was produced out of state, then it gets kind of tricky with, I guess, like the process with that. I guess it might be easier with municipalities for that reason because it's smaller. But I don't know what department
If
supermarkets
we're
have.
specifically talking about a bag ban, what would you think?
I would think that it would be better to go, I would think a supermarket, something that large, would actually do better with a larger bag ban. Because otherwise, they'd be like, okay, in Mechanicsburg, we can have the bags, but we can't in Carlisle, you know what I mean? It would be really confusing for them. Because a store like that has so many branches. And I
Well,
realize, yeah.
and then also it's very difficult for them if every ordinance is going to be different. Like, so say some allow 2.5 or 4 millimeter plastic bags, or they have a 10-cent or a 15-cent or whatever. So they're all over the place. So they definitely prefer a state ban for the bags, because then they have one set of rules to follow and to implement, and then through their logistical system it makes it much easier. All right, so now we're going to get into the meat of it. Jennifer Congdon is the Deputy Director of Beyond Plastics and is one of the founding staff members. She's thoughtful, pragmatic, nonprofit management and environmental policy expert with 20 years of experience. And she has served 3 New York governors in appointed leadership positions and has led numerous organizations to reach fundraising and organizational goals. She has been passionate about the environment and activism since she was 8. And she convinced her parents to participate in boycotting McDonald's to end their polystyrene. And it actually worked. They phased out the practice in 1990. So she really firmly believes that one person can make a difference, and is in awe of also the power of collective action. So Jennifer, take it away. You can load up your presentation.
Thank you so much, Tamala. And thanks for that introduction. That's where I'm going to start, at individual action versus collective action and systemic change. And then we're going to dive into government structures again and circle back to some of the conversations we were just having with Tamala. So I'm going to share my screen. You're going to get to see all my tabs. I'm so sorry. And then I'm going to do slideshow. And hopefully this works. Everybody see okay?
Yep.
Great. All right. So let's talk first. Why does this matter, right? Like when we're talking about all of the work that we do to make change in the world, you know, there's a lot of a narrative of personal responsibility. And one person, you know, our actions do matter in the world, in part because they add up to a lot of other actions. But, you know, a lot of people ask us, you know, how do I get all of the plastic out of my kitchen? How do I, you know, what do I use to pick up my dog waste when I'm taking my dog for a walk? And all of that is lovely. But what we really want people to spend their time on is systemic change. So we can BYO coffee mug, we can, do all the plastic free shopping in our own homes. And that's great for your own personal health. And it does, it helps a little bit, but the impact is minimal. And if we use individual change as the place of our advocacy work, then we're sort of assuming accessibility for people. And we're also actually playing right into the hands of the petrochemical industry, because they want to perpetuate, they want the narrative that the plastics crisis is our fault. It's not our fault. We did not ask for all of these plastics, and people around the world are begging for less plastic, and they just continue to pump it out and push it our way. So we like to focus on bigger systemic change. So plastic bag bans, other plastic bans, focusing on institutions, so schools, hospitals, places where we can have a really big impact, different kind of policies like extended producer responsibility. And really the outcomes there are much larger. And we increase the number of people that we are reaching, and it shifts the narrative of responsibility to the companies, which is really where the responsibility lies. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Next slide is, we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. So we can, again, do a lot of inward focusing and try to get our own lives perfect, but that's really not where we need to be. We need to be focused on getting into the room where it happens. So I am a Hamilton fan, Hamilton the musical. My kids are Hamilton fans, but part of what I love about Hamilton is that it's, it's part just drama, all sorts of like marital strife and all of that, the Revolutionary War, but it's also about politics, and it's about the questions of how we make change in the world. And so what we really want to encourage all of you and all of the people who work with us through our local groups and affiliates program is to do your best to get into the room where it happens. And the second video that Tamala showed, I love that, because she was saying a challenge to all of us to really participate in local government. And local government is the most responsive to people locally. And that's exactly what they said about Pennsylvania, and why your government structures were set up and levels were set up the way that they are, is that local government was seen as most responsive to the people who live there. You've heard all politics are local. It's a very similar idea. So what happens locally really matters to you, but also you have more access to those politicians. Hold on one second. What do you need?
Real quick, while she's on pause there, I'll give you guys a really quick example too. I went to my local school board when I learned about what PFAS were and about their problematic in our drinking water, and that the Pennsylvania was going to be working on putting together maximum contamination levels for the PFAS. And I wanted to find out from them if they had tested their drinking water, and if not, to ask them to test their drinking water for PFAS. And they did not, they had not tested, but they ended up testing. And based on that testing, they are ahead of the game with getting, civil engineers to look at their system, because they're going to have to, purify it and, look for grants and money and all this stuff. And so at the same time, I, am helping the community to not have PFAS, because their system will start purifying our water before other municipalities who haven't begun the process yet. So that's one example.
Yeah, and probably just as importantly, honestly, is that civic engagement is central to our democracy. So,
water?
Oh,
My new foot of this lost.
Thank you. Civic engagement is central to the health of our democracy. So getting involved in your local government, I think sometimes, I don't think this, I know, because activists talk to us all the time. and they're nervous about going to elected officials. Like, but what, what do I have to say? And why should they listen to me? And should they take the meeting? And there's a million questions. And the answer is that it's actually not only in your right, it's really our duty to stay involved and talk to our elected officials and share with them what's happening, because they're only human beings. They can't know every single thing that's going on in their community. And there should be an interaction between elected officials and their constituents. So I want to tell a very quick case study. So when I was in the governor's office in New York State, an organization and some volunteers that they had came to me with a problem that I didn't really know existed. I wasn't really thinking about it yet. I had other things on my mind. I was running around. I don't remember. Actually, I think we were working on fracking at the time. And like, what are we going to do about fracking? And they came and said, we have an electronic waste problem and we need to do something about it. And they had pictures of electronic waste that had been shipped overseas and images of young children melting down the lead to sell it. And, I'm just like appalled by the lead poisoning that's happening and just sickened by the idea of our waste going off to another country, like just being dumped in another country. And I was like, well, I'm in government. I'm in the governor's office. I can actually do something about this. And so I worked with that organization and many other organizations and the industry to develop an electronic waste recycling law for New York State. It's imperfect. It needs updates, but it was one of the best at the time. This was like, oh my gosh, like 15 years ago at this time. But all because people came and talked to me when I was in government. I didn't know that this problem really existed in the way that, I mean, it's obvious to me now, right? Like I'd already gone through 3 cell phones at the time. Where were they going exactly? But it was enlightening to me. And then we did something about it. And that is the best case of government working with the people. So we're going to talk again about government structure and levels of government. And we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to this. And I also want to caveat this with, I don't live in Pennsylvania. I grew up 10 minutes north of the border in Binghamton, but every state is different. And I actually, with Beyond Plastics, I do a lot of work in New York, but I'm also the person who does work in Minnesota and Michigan, Illinois, and a couple of other states. And I'm learning as I go too about every state and how their government works, how their governance works, how their democratic process works. And it's shockingly different in every state. But there's some things that are sort of fundamentally the same, and we're going to talk about that, and we can more specifically get into some questions that you guys had in the beginning about Pennsylvania government and where to go. So everybody, as the video said, talks about federal government. We know about Congress and their dysfunction. We know about the presidency. State government, it's hard to reach those guys. They can be helpful sometimes. You're members of Congress, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they're not really, they're not dealing with all those local issues that we talked about. We have state government. That state government can be a very powerful force, and something that when our campaigns are ready, we can approach state government to get certain laws passed or certain policies enacted. And that is a really important level of government that we all could work at. And then you have, as you guys know, in Pennsylvania, you've got county, borough, you guys have counties, and then you guys also have boroughs and some cities and towns, I think is the Pennsylvania structure. That's similar, again, around the country, there's different names for those, but basically there's usually another like larger level of government and then like really small local. And then, as Tamla was saying, you've got your school board and, local dog catcher and the fire district and like all of that stuff. So And sometimes we have to deal with those guys. Sometimes there's like, your local water district is a separate entity, and you might be dealing with a PFAS issue. So, it depends on, you'll work with whatever level of government you need to for whatever problem you're facing. If you ever want to know, if you don't know and you want to know, you should know who your elected officials are. You can go to commoncause.org and type in your address, and it will give you everything from Joe Biden to the fire district chief. So you can use that website. So within each of these levels of government, there's usually, not always, usually 3 branches of government for like checks and balances. I'm bringing you back to, 11th grade civics now. But the executive is the entity that enforces all of the laws that are passed by the legislative branch. So if you want a law passed, you would go to a legislator at some level of government, again, depending on where we're going to start. And then once that law gets passed, it's the executive that implements it and enforces it. And so rulemaking, which you'll hear sometimes, or state agencies, those are under the executive branch. That's part of implementing laws. The elected, and usually there's a governor at the state level. You may have, do you guys have county executives or like trustees? Oh, I can't hear you, Tamla. County executive or a board of trustees?
I have 3 county commissioners. I know the least about that. So
Okay, yeah.
I know 3 of them in our county. So would that be
All
a
right.
board? Would that be a board of commissioners then? Yes?
Yeah, it's a board of commissioners, and I wonder if there is an executive branch. And this is something we could dive into more as you guys have specific things that you want to bring, and we can do this one-off as you move forward after today. We don't have to solve all these questions tonight, but I'm going to get into a little bit of Dillon's rule versus home rule and how that changes things. And so I think it depends on what status your particular county is, home rule versus Dillon's rule, and what, for what, how many laws they can pass and how much control they have over their local municipal government. And then we don't deal with this as much because we're not lawyers. We don't do lawsuits. But it is an important branch of government, is the judicial branch, and it's an important branch. A lot of environmental laws that already exist aren't always enforced. And so, groups like Earth Justice and the SEAL, Center for International Environmental Law, they'll bring lawsuits against polluters. They'll bring lawsuits against the state or the state government or federal government for not enforcing the law as it was passed by a legislature. So again, another way to look at this, and we talked about this earlier, when you're doing your advocacy, it is important to first try to figure out who to talk to and where to go. And I will say, like most of our environmental laws, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act are passed, they were federal statutes, and the states get delegated the responsibility for enforcing the federal Clean Air Act and the federal Clean Water Act. And so that's an interplay between the feds and the state. Now, you would think that that would mean that every state implements the federal Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act exactly the same across the board. You would be wrong. That is not how it goes. Some states really exercise their muscle, and that again would be the executive branch doing that at the state level. And other states are very loose and do not enforce the law at all. And that's how you get places like Cancer Alley, is states not enforcing the federal Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act in the same protective way that like New York State does. So these are just some examples in this little Venn diagram of the where you might go for, you know, different issues that you're having. Like trash pickup is usually a local issue. Implementing solid waste programs, usually a local issue. But if you want to change the entire state's solid waste program, you have to go to the state to do that. You guys may have, sometimes parks are local, sometimes they're state, and we have national parks. So, you know, if you wanted to get bottled water out of a national park, you wouldn't go to your county commissioners to get that done. You would have to launch a campaign to talk to the federal government about that. Any questions about this right now? Okay, great. So, rules of engagement. So first, just ask, right? Like ask for the meeting, make the call, make the request. It may be the wrong one, right? You may think, oh, you know, I really like this county park is selling, you know, bottled water, and I really want them to stop. And so you call, maybe you haven't taken this course yet, and you call your mayor, and they're like, sorry, we don't deal with that. Government, people working in government should, they don't have to, but they should help direct you to the right office. Especially if you're kind and respectful, they'll be more likely to do that. But you should also be confident, because you really do have every right to be there and be heard. And your involvement actually strengthens the democratic process. And so, you know, go in there with like, I have a right to make this request. I'm going to be kind about it. I'm not going to yell at anybody, but I'm going to state my case. Be factual, always tell the truth. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know the answer to that. You are not expected to be an expert in this field. You are a citizen. And just because you don't know what the measurement of the PFAS is in the water at the school doesn't mean you don't have a right as a citizen to say, I'd like my water at the school to not have PFAS in it, right? You don't have to be the engineer or the scientist. You don't even have to know where the lab is that they need to send it to get it tested. That's not your job. You are a citizen and you have rights and you have an ability, and you can talk to your local elected officials. As I said in my case study, I'm just human. Elected officials are only human. They get sort of, I think we get awestruck sometimes. We think they develop these larger than life personas because they're on TV. You see them talking. They're just people, and mostly they're trying to do a good job. Most are there for good reasons. Some are not. And, you'll learn that over time. And so it's also, it's important to trust but verify that what you're being told is true. And one of the things I see a lot at the state government level is a lot of like, oh, we can't do anything about that. It's not being held up here. It's that person is holding it up. Or, you just need to like get a few more memos in, and, then we'll be able to pass it. So like, there is a bit of like a pass the buck kind of mentality. And so it's important to hold them to account. It's like, well, you're actually an elected official. And, also elected officials sometimes will do a call relay or an action alert, and they'll say, oh, you all these people calling my office. It's like, yeah, that's part of your job, is to take those calls. So it's okay. You might fluster them once in a while, but this is the give and take. This is the back and forth of being in elected office. Your own electeds are really who you should focus on, unless you are working on like a larger campaign that's statewide, where you might be talking to a elected officials that are the heads of various committees and have a duty to the larger state as a whole. But really where you're going to get the most traction is with your own elected officials. You matter more to them as a voter than because it's, you know, a much smaller population of people, and you can talk to your friends and you can get people to turn on them if they're not doing the right thing, and vote them out of office. So your power locally is really strong, where it's more diffused at the state level and definitely at the national level. There was one of the questions I think people had was, what's more effective, one-on-one or in groups? And I think that there's a place for both. One-on-one, sometimes elected officials are less guarded. And if you've developed a relationship with them, they may be able to talk really openly with you about what the politics are, what's happening, and like where a log jam is if you're struggling to get something over the finish line. Groups are really effective for showing broad support. And so I would say those are just two different tactics that you should use based on the situation. So always be mindful of lobbying laws and restrictions. Most of the time you won't have to worry about this, because really it's like if you're being paid to do advocacy work, then even if it's by a nonprofit organization, you may be considered a lobbyist. But if you're a volunteer resident, you're usually exempt from any kind of filing. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. You can meet electeds in their office, outside their office. You can meet for coffee. If you have, you know, a relationship like that with them, you can meet them for dinner. They're more likely to meet in their office if they don't know you. So that would be the first request. But if you've developed a rapport with them over time, you know, it's fine to go out together. But it is usually best not to give them anything or buy them anything, because that could be seen as a bribe. And there's a lot of times there's limits on how much you can give to an elected official. You can feel free to donate to campaigns. Don't hold back if you have the ability to do that. And there's specific rules about, you know, limits on how much you can donate for that. So, you know, you can develop relationships with them. Just be mindful of lobbying rules and restrictions. So home rule versus Dillon's rule. I think this is a big question that people often have. These are just two different approaches to local governance. And what happens is it really impacts the kinds of laws and ordinance that municipalities are allowed to pass. So for Dillon's rule, it's a very narrow approach to local government, where local governments only have powers that are expressly granted to them by the state. Whereas home rule, New York's actually a home rule state, local governments have greater autonomy. And it really limits the power of the state to interfere in local affairs. So a municipality with home rule can exercise any power and perform any function unless it's specifically prohibited doing so by the state. And so that's going to come into play for you guys in different localities. So I think that'll be an important thing for you to talk about as you move forward with your advocacy work. And I actually just pulled this off of Wikipedia because I was curious. So most munis in Pennsylvania are actually governed under Dillon's rule, so they don't have a lot of power, but your state constitution does empower counties to frame and adopt home rule charters. And then these are actually the home rule municipalities in Pennsylvania. And again, you can just find this on Wikipedia, but I think this is going to be important. You'll have in a home rule area, you will have more ability to get certain laws adopted there than you will in a Dillon's rule area. So again, you know, how do I know who to talk to? If you're confused, you know, ask a friend, but you can also go to your most local representative and truly just like, you know, whoever, like your town, your city, your county, whoever it is, and you can just ask them, hey, I'm having this problem and you're my representative and I want to know who to talk to about it. And they should be able to help you. If you're not getting help, and this is where I said I would come back to your member of Congress, if you're not getting help from your local electeds, if, you know, they're just stonewalling you, you really can elevate things. And members of Congress are pretty responsive, I think, to constituents who are struggling with another government entity, and they will sometimes step in and try to help facilitate a conversation. So if you're not getting help, elevate it. And so I wanted to talk again, we can get back to what we were doing before. So some examples of like, where do you go? So land use and zoning, we know that that's local control, local government there. Installation of synthetic turf. And I stayed quiet before, but I wanted to say that if you're dealing with a specific installation of synthetic turf, it is absolutely a local issue. But maybe we want to, at some point, work on a statewide ban of synthetic turf on playing fields or at schools. And that's when we would go to the state government and try to get a law passed through the state legislature. Contamination issues. You know, these are mostly state and federal issues, but it's also something that you could go to your local representative to get them on board to help with the advocacy. Again, a lot of the Clean Water and Clean Air Act is really administered by the state, and the permits are granted by the state. And so permit violations would be state level issues. But if you're not getting the response you need from state government, engaging the locals or engaging a member of Congress to come at them in some other way would be the way to go. And I think we've talked all about the branches, so we don't need to do that again. So this is very close to the end of my presentation. I just want to turn now to how, like, what are some of the ways that we can influence government? So we've got one-on-one meetings, which is great, and getting involved in government is really, really important. So that's our direct contact, right? We also have petitions. People often ask me, but are petitions really useful? Like, does anyone pay attention? And I will say, yes, they are useful, and maybe sort of they pay attention. But petitions are really useful because it is the easiest thing for people to do. And so you're likely to get a lot of people to sign versus asking them to do like a phone call. You'll only get a handful of people. And what a petition will do is get you a list of people who are interested in the issue and may be interested in doing more work. So petitions are very useful in terms of an organizing tool. You can do presentations to other organizations, presentations to legislatures, presentations to members of a governor's team, or in your local, you know, you can go to some meetings of the county commissioners, and maybe at some point you can do a presentation on why counties in Pennsylvania should deal with plastic pollution and what are some ideas, right? Maybe they'll give you that stage. So there's lots of ways that we can use presentations to reach more audiences. Social media, some politicians pay attention to social media, some do not. It's a great organizing tool, a great way to get people involved. And sometimes certain politicians really are like, they just like love Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. And will, you know, if you tag them and you get other people tagging them, they'll really take notice of it. Phone calls are probably like one of the highest levels of contact to for politicians. So if they're getting phone calls into their office, they know that it takes more effort for people to make phone calls. For some reason, people hate making calls, right? They're just like, they don't know what's going to happen on the other end of the line. It feels weird to them. Like it makes people nervous. And so politicians know that if they've got 10 phone calls on something, that there's a lot more people that care about this issue who aren't calling. And then, of course, using the news media to your advantage. So earned media like press conferences, but also letters to the editor and opinion editorials are very powerful ways to reach decision makers and policy makers. And again, these are the ways that we spread the word, build support, get attention from policymakers for our issues, reach larger audiences, generate turnout to events and hearings, communicate with policymakers. And I'll just say on communication, it's really important to make within the facts and within being honest, to make your issue, like to communicate how scary it is. Like plastic pollution is really scary. I'm frightened for my children in the future. I see the charts of where we're heading, and I know how bad it is already. And it's worrisome. And so communicate that worry to politicians, because really they're in a role that's supposed to be serving the public. It's local. It's not just an ocean issue. For a long time, people thought it was just an ocean issue. This is a land issue. It's a health issue. It's a here and now issue. And it's urgent. We need to do this right now. We cannot wait 20 years to get rid of plastic pollution. So this is my last slide. Please consider joining Beyond Plastics as a local group and affiliate. We have a training actually coming up starting this weekend that you still have time to register for, but we offer them quarterly. And it's actually part of what I did tonight is part of my presentation for that. But it actually goes into deep detail about just the whole problem of plastic pollution, and even more detail on how to use those advocacy tools. And on our website, we have many campaigns that are ready-made for you. Different types of plastic bans. You can go in and use the ready-made campaigns. We have petition language. We have model legislation that you can use to approach legislators. We have social media toolkits and all sorts of tools available for you on our website. So that is it. I will end my screen share. Thank you. Oh, Tamala, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was fantastic. So what questions do you guys have for Jennifer? I have one if nobody has one. Okay, so I have formed a personal relationship with my mayor because I am on the Climate Action Commission for the borough. And I had asked them to also test their wastewater, and I went to another meeting and did a small PowerPoint presentation trying to convince them not to use pyrolysis to dispose of their biosolids, because they're a land spreader as well. And so they have tested their wastewater, but they're not releasing the information to me. And so I did a tabling event at Earth Day Festival, and the mayor came by the table and I wasn't there. And then I saw him somewhere else, and where they had food, and he actually bought me a hamburger. So I told him, I'm like, hey, I've emailed 4 times the public works director. And, he's CC'd on it too. Mayor Schultz, I CC him, and I also CC the borough manager. So they're all in the loop, right? And no one's getting back to me. I said, Sean, I need this information, you know. I said, if you want me to keep it under wraps for the moment, I have no problem with that. But I personally want to know the information because I'm asking. And I said, but you know you guys are working on things and I don't want to mess up it, you know, your progress, you know. So that's not the point of it, you know, but he's still not giving it. And then another municipality, where I found an impaired stream, I had put in a report to DEP, and DEP did some testing and they had released that to me. But since then I have found out about PFAS. So I asked DEP, you know, hey, have you tested for PFAS? And they won't talk to me. And they said, go to the township. And so I've emailed them at least 7 times. Nothing. It's like I'm ghosted. So I'm like, okay, you know, what's the next steps here? Because like, I want the information, but one, I have a relationship with, and I don't want to burn any bridges, right? And then the other, well, they read all of my emails, but they're not responding. So I'm like, do I put in that right to know request, or what should I do?
Yes, you should. Yes.
Okay.
I would put in a right to know request, and you can do that before the next steps, which I would think would be contacting a reporter to let them know that you are asking these questions and you're not getting any answers, because they may try to get an answer next, which would be, whoops, you know, now what are we going to say, right, to a reporter? So that would be my,
Okay.
yeah,
Because
you could start with the freedom of information request.
would I put that through to the township or through DEP? Because to me, DEP is the one who had to have tested. Why are they telling me that they're not going to tell me anything? I need to talk to the township.
Yeah.
So either way, one or the other, or both of them honestly should be talking to me.
Yeah, I mean, you could do both.
You know, the one township used the legacy landfill was originally the under Carlisle Borough, but now it's under a different township, and it's a itty bitty little thing. That's why I kind of thought townships were smaller, because you know they probably just have like a few thousand people in it. But it's like I think they're not answering me because I'm not a resident. So I don't know if, you know, but if they legally have to, do they legally have to answer me if I'm not a resident?
That's a good question. I don't think, unless you've put in for like through a formal process, like freedom of information law to get information, I don't think government entities are obligated to give information. I think it's good practice, but I think unless it's an official request, it's not, they don't have an obligation to give it. And
So
you know, who
what's
knows
the difference
why the
between
whole
Freedom of Information Act and right to know? What's the
I
difference
think
between?
that's probably the same thing. I think it's just like that's what it's called in New York, where I'm from, is the Freedom of Information law. We call it a FOIL request. So, but I think it's a right to know request.
Are they arduous to put through? I've limited.
I know you do. It depends on the state. It depends on the state. Look, if it's looking too arduous, again, you are a citizen. I would, you know, I think it's time to call a reporter if it's just like, this is going to be too much. Sandy has an idea.
Yeah, tell me,
Yeah,
Sandy.
so at your local level, you should be able to put in a right to know request with the township. Just walk in there, talk to the person at the front desk or whoever, and tell them you want to do it, and they'll give you a form. And one of the things to remember, though, is that person just works there. And I'm not saying you would do this, but we had an experience with our fight in Point Township where some people were demanding right to know request information and harassing that poor person who's responsible for generating those. So just remember that poor person is not, you know, but they can be helpful. And to Jennifer's point during her talk, kind and respectful and truthful and I think, I mean, the same with DEP. I think you could go to their website and find information about how to do a right to know request and do that. And they should give you the information. I mean, DEP, even if you're not, you know, you're a citizen of Pennsylvania, so you can do that. But the township, I mean, maybe you find someone in the township that you know and get them to do it, but I don't see why you can't. We had tons of people doing all kinds of right to know requests, lawyers from Philadelphia doing Point Township and getting it and having no problem. And we got lots of good information. Yeah. It's creepy though. Sometimes you like get emails and stuff and it's creepy going through somebody else's email. Ew, I just did not like that part.
But I mean, as officials, they need, you know, like they forget sometimes, but their emails are the public can see them if there's a right to know request put through. So
yeah, it just feels dirty.
I get it, Sandy.
Does anybody have any more questions? We have 4 minutes past our time. And I really appreciate all of you coming out tonight. And like you said, just follow up with me if you know you have any further questions on anything specific and need any specific resources or anything. And I'm sure, you know, we can ask Sandy, Jennifer, or find and answer Becca. Becca is a new friend that I met via phone. And she worked as an intern at what level, Becca? With who? I can't remember who you said.
I was an intern with Lisa Borowski's office. She's one of the Pennsylvania state representatives. So yeah, so we were connecting. I was in a constituent services office.
Can I ask a question about that state government level stuff?
Yes, totally.
So so my state representative is an absolute boob. He's a moron. He doesn't have any of my values. He's a terrible person and a terrible representative.
Mm-hmm.
How do I go around him and get things done? You know, as his constituent, can I talk to somebody else's representative and say, hey, can you talk to this guy and kick him in the shin or something? You know,
there are so, yeah, sorry, continue your question.
No, go ahead.
That is, first of all, a very valid experience. Watching the Pennsylvania House session live, I was like, wow, half these people are not qualified for this job. And I'm sorry that your representative seems not to really care. So I think my advice would be, and this is going to sound kind of extreme, but he's not going to want to change anything unless he feels that his position is threatened. So I would say run a campaign against him, like try to organize for that. And when that happens, he will then feel a need, hopefully to either listen or get replaced. And I would also say you can impact their office. So if you really want like him to read an email, what happens in the state house is legislators will have their own internal email, and then the email that's on their webpage or website that constituents write into goes to the office. So they will usually get handled by the chief of staff or constituent services advisors. And we couldn't answer those if they were like more personally, you know, if they couldn't be answered with a generic write-up, I think that's the best way, like make communications to the office more detailed and difficult to just brush off. Sometimes there will be big surges of emails, especially around budget season, people saying, I want this on the table, I don't like this legislation that's trying to be passed. And volume matters and consistency matters. So you want to do more than just get your names on the list of people who wrote in about a plastic ban. I definitely understand your question, and I think it's something I'm also trying to consider of, like, having people write in and putting their name on a list that gets reported to caucus, whether Republican or Democrat. I don't think it's really enough. I mean, it's really frustrating when people are writing in and there's, first of all, not transparency with where that's going, and also, let me just loop back into what I was saying. I don't want to get too off tangent.
I have one suggestion too.
Yeah.
So I assume you guys in the legislature have committees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another thing to do is look for, I assume this is going to be an environmental issue, but whatever the issue is, look for the committee, and find the chair or the ranking minority chair, depending on the party you're looking, to get some movement from. And by the way, it's also really hard to get anything through a legislature if the issue you care about is not cared about by the majority party. But anyway, I digress. Go to the committee chair and try to approach them, because they have an at-large position, so they're accountable to everyone on that issue area, and so I think that can also be a way in.
I agree that something I learned was the committee chairs have so much power, because once a bill gets into their committee, they have the power to either say, okay, we're not going to do anything with it. They can just let it die. So if a committee chair is not on your side, then yeah, you're going to have to find other ways. But I can also, Sandy, we can exchange emails, and if I come up with another idea of how to work with or work around the limitations of your representative, I will definitely let you know.
Thank you. That's helpful. I don't have a specific thing right now. It's just, I just feel very unrepresented by this person. People say, oh yeah, contact. It's like, I can't do that.
Yeah. I think another thing is watch the House sessions live, because the representatives really don't think that their constituents are going to watch session and how they behave. So you can even write in, well, say, I've been watching you in session, and I don't know, I just think that they don't feel that their constituents, that they're accountable to their constituents when they're on the House floor. So to make them know that they're being watched and being seen, or like even have like a watch party of like session, if one of if one of your representatives bills like on the table or something, just try to increase that, because they feel, I think, way too much privacy during session, and they need to feel more accountable and responsible to their constituents.
Yeah,
I
that's good to
love
know.
that idea, Becca, of a watch party for a bill that's like, I love that one. That's fantastic. All right, I'm writing that one down. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and have a rest of your evening. Go well, and we hope to catch up and work on issues together, and and support one another. And thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks,
having me.
Jennifer. Thanks,
Thank
Pamela.
you, Jennifer. That was amazing.
Thank you, Becca. Thanks, Sandy. Nice to see
Bye-bye.
you. Bye, Tamala. Thank you so much.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Julia.